Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Wishwell Farms. As promised in the prior video, today I'm going to show you how I water and fertilize all of my baby tomato plants in our basement. But first, I want to take you in here and show you what's going on in the greenhouse. I've been working on trying to get everything ready in here for moving our baby tomato plants out here into the starter house. We also call it our seeding house, our transplant house. It has 3 different names. So last night I spent about an hour and a half out here working in this greenhouse, moving the racks, pulling weeds, sweeping up all the junk, stuff that I put off last fall. And we just about got it done. I got this front half completely cleaned up and ready for tomato plants. And today I'm gonna work back here in the back half. I've already removed all the racks. Just gotta go around, pull all the weeds up around the baseboards, underneath all of our flats and trays over here on the left. And the weeds tend to grow around the concrete blocks. You know, I wish I had a better system, just some nicer racks out here, but I did this probably almost 20 years ago, and I was trying to do it on the cheap. You know, I bought these calf hutch fence panels and picked up a skid of concrete blocks. Boom, done. Cheap and simple, and it works pretty well for me. The only thing I wish that was different in this greenhouse is I should have put some kind of floor heat in. Radiant floor heat, just a little water heater with some recirculating hot water for keeping the young tomato plants warm during January and the first half of February. After that, the days are getting longer, the sun's getting more intense, more directly above us, and it'll get really warm in here. Even though the plants still get a little bit cold at night, it's only for about 5 or 6 hours that they dip below that 60-degree mark that we don't ever want to see our tomatoes at. But then they warm right back up, and they seem to grow really well out here despite not having any radiant floor heat. All right, now I want to take you down to my basement and show you how we water and fertilize. Make sure my dog came with me. Are you ready to go back inside, Tessie? Okay, let's go. I don't trust my dog out here alone, so I'll take her in the greenhouse with me sometimes, but otherwise she has to be watched very carefully because she will take off. All right, I'm currently standing down in my basement. I'm going to show you how the plants are looking. It's been about 6 days since we seeded them, and I'm also going to show you guys how I fertilize them down here in my basement. So here's kind of what our seed starting setup looks like. As you can see, I have a piece of Reflectix on top just because these LED lights do not produce much heat. And we also had a cold snap where it got down to 8 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit outside. And there's my basement door to the outside. So it got pretty cool down here, and I added some supplemental heat as well to keep it above 65 degrees in here. But the main thing that heats our basement, other than just being warm in general, because it's right underneath our living room, is I added this little piece of ductwork off of our main heating ductwork of our house to blow hot air down here. So here's what they look like right now. They're in the cotyledon stage. The first 2 leaves have not opened yet, but they have pretty much all emerged, except these 2 flats. And I'll tell you why here in a second. But they're looking pretty good. I got the LED lights about, I'd say about 12 inches above the flats right now. We're currently at 67 degrees and 41% humidity. I'd actually like that humidity to be closer to 60 to 65, but there's not much I can do about it down here during the dry winter months, unless I added a humidifier. But I've never really had an issue with the humidity, so I'm not too concerned about that. The biggest concern is the temperature. Looks like we're at 74 there. That one says 72. See, I got 4 thermometers spread throughout here to kind of monitor the root temperature. So during the day, I would prefer to have the temperature around 70 to 75 down here. We've been struggling to keep it around 70 just because of how cold it's been outside. And I'd like to have my root temperature always above 64. At night, and the air temperature probably gets down to there as well. Now during the day, I'd prefer to see it 70 to 75. And once it starts warming up outside a little bit, that shouldn't be a problem. So you can see I also have a little piece of Reflectix in the back, and then I have this big piece of blue board insulation over here to kind of keep the heat trapped in there, because there's just not heat being produced by these LEDs like there was with my high pressure sodium lights. So I'm just going to move this blue board out of the way for now. That's kind of what we got going on here. If you want to hear more details about our germination mats, our thermostat, and just other details about our varieties, that was all in the prior video. I will link that down below in the description if you want to check all that out. Today is mainly going to be about how I water and fertilize the seedlings. So like I said, it's been about a week since I seeded the tomato plants, and I mentioned the 2 trays over there of Geronimo that did not come up well. If you take a good look at those, you can see it's less than 50% germination on those 2 flats. And I believe that happened because of 2 reasons. One, I carried some seed over from last year that only had 87% germination on the package, and they obviously did not even do that well. Probably more like 40 to 60% germination rate this year. So I did reseed those. I put an extra 100 seeds in those 2 flats where I didn't see one coming up. Now sometimes there was just one that was maybe in a deeper hole, or the germination rate is just not even. So there still are some coming up, and I did not put a new seed in those holes. So if I do happen to get 2 seeds in one of the holes that I replanted, I'll just pluck one out. So I'd rather have some plants that are a little bit behind rather than not have enough plants at all. So that's why I seeded some extra ones in there. The Torero came up great, darn near 100% germination rate. Those Geronimos came up pretty darn good, and the grape tomatoes came up really good. Glad to see that. All right, when it comes to watering and fertilizing these rock wool slabs, I will pick up the entire flat and bring it over here to this yellow tub, and I will gently set it in there just on top of the water, and the water will wick up into the rock wool. I don't want any water on top of the seedlings. In this blue bucket is where I heat my water up for mixing the fertilizer, and I just do that with a like a water trough heater you get from a farm store. Now once I get the fertilizer mixed up in the blue bucket and dissolved well, I will dump it into this bigger tank, and I'll stir it around with this tomato stake until I get an electrical conductivity of around 1.8 to 2. We don't want it too strong when the seedlings are young like this, and we don't want it too weak, or it's not going to be enough feed for them, enough fertilizer for them. So that's kind of how that works right here. I mix in the blue bucket, concentrated, and then I'll dump it in here until I get the right strength of what I need for watering, and then I'll scoop out of this barrel into the yellow tub. I know it's a lot of steps, but I've got a tight space down here. I don't have access to anything outside unless I walk through my entire house and down my steps. So this has always worked really good, and it's only for 2.5 weeks, and then everything will be moved out to the greenhouse. Now here's the items that I will be using to mix in the water. This is calcium nitrate, so that's our nitrate form of nitrogen. This is our vine crop concentrate mix. I think it might be called HydroGrow. Yeah, HydroGrow hydroponic fertilizer. And the nitrogen source in here, even though it doesn't say on here, it is an ammoniacal nitrogen, 4% ammoniacal. So there's no nitrate nitrogen in here. So to give them a little bit of nitrate nitrogen, I will take some calcium nitrate and mix with this. And then everything else that the tomato plants need is in here, all the rest of the macros and the micros. And to lower the pH of my water to 5.8 to 6, I will just use this sulfuric acid picked up from the auto parts store. Now when I get these plants all out into the main greenhouse, I will not be using this anymore. I will be using a lot stronger sulfuric acid that comes in 15-gallon drums. Now to measure the EC and the pH, I use my little combo pH and EC meter right here. Normally when I measure all my fertilizer out here, I either use just like a simple tablespoon like this, if I'm just making a small batch. But today I'm making a big batch of whatever this is, probably almost 30 gallons. So normally I have a measuring cup out here, but they're all out in my greenhouse, so I just snagged one from my wife's kitchen. So we're gonna measure out the fertilizer and acid with this. We'll get a concentrated mix in the blue bucket, and then we will put the sulfuric acid directly into this tank and stir it around until we get the pH of our water, which is normally about a 7.7 down to closer to a 5.8, no higher than 6. So there are instructions down here for making a small batch, but since I have my EC meter, I don't need to use that. So I'm going to go 2 to 1 on these products. So I'm going to do, if I do 1 cup of this, I'm only going to use a half a cup of this. If I have too much nitrate nitrogen mixed in there, it's going to create more cell elongation. You're going to get longer, leggy plants. Now, when the plants are bigger and growing rapidly out in the greenhouses, they need a lot more nitrate nitrogen, but not when they're in this little seedling stage. They just need mainly ammoniacal nitrogen, 2 to 1 to nitrate nitrogen. That'll keep that internode length a little shorter, because we want a nice, stocky, robust plant, not a big, long, leggy plant that's going to fall over. All right, let's get this mixed up. Now, the other issue with doing it this way is I've never kept track of detailed records on how many cups of each item that I need to get the right strength down here. So it's just gonna be a guessing game. I'm just gonna make a pretty strong concentrate in here that'll hopefully be more than enough to bring this big tank up to the right EC that I need for feeding these plants, which I think I mentioned, a 1.8 up to a 2. So I'm gonna take, this is a 1/4 cup. 1, 2. We're just gonna start light right now. I don't wanna put too much in there. So 2 of those and 1 of the calcium nitrate. Now, I already warmed this water up to help the fertilizer dissolve better when I stir it. I realize this is a very rudimentary way to do this. It works for me. I don't need something complicated and expensive down here in my basement when I'm only down here for 2.5 weeks. Very simple, very easy way to do this for me. You get that stirred up good, hopefully it gets all dissolved. Sometimes the calcium nitrate takes a little bit longer to dissolve because it's a little bigger chunks, but I got like 85-degree water in there, so it usually dissolves pretty quickly. All right, I got my combo meter here to read my EC and pH. I have it set on the EC setting, and our water is not reverse osmosis water. We're using straight out of the well water, and it has some stuff in it. It comes out to a 0.88 today. That's pretty typical. Usually it's about a 0.75 to a 0.85 EC. In a perfect world, we want a 0. You know, reverse osmosis water would be best. That way the tomatoes are getting exactly everything they need. So my recipe to feed my tomatoes, maybe not so much here since I'm using a pre-formulated blend, but when we go out in the greenhouses, when these things are set in their beto buckets, the recipe has been formulated specifically with my well water in mind. So it's been adjusted, I guess, to accommodate my well water of 0.8. And I sent a water sample in to get it tested, and you know, they see all the stuff that's in it and then adjust the recipe accordingly. All right. Give this one more little stir. It might not even take this whole bucket. I don't know. We're going to pour about half of it in there, and let's see what it says. That brought it up to about a 1.5, so we're getting close. 1.7. So good thing I didn't dump it all in there. Just need a little bit more. Get that all mixed in good, and that looks like right where we need to be. Almost too strong. It says 2.1. 2.07. Right where we need to be. I can't really show you because it goes back to 0 when I pull it out of here. Not sure if you'll be able to see that or not. 2.06. Yeah, I think you can see that through the camera. That's right where we want to be. Now you can see that number right underneath the 2. 57 degrees, that's how cold that water is. I do not want to water these plants over here with 56-degree water. So that's why I put it into the yellow tub. Throw this in there for about 20 minutes and warm that water up to about 70. And then I'll be ready to dunk those slabs in to water them and feed them. Okay, now that we have our EC, our feed of 2, I'm going to push this button and see what our pH is. I probably should have done the pH first. I normally get the pH where I want it first and then add the fertilizer because it's so easy to overdo the acid to lower the pH. And if you mess it up and put too much in, then you got to like add a whole bunch more water and then it throws your EC off, if that makes sense. So it's better to get the water down to the 5.8 that I want first and then slowly add the fertilizer, but I did it backwards today, but it'll still work out. I just have to be really careful when adding the sulfuric acid that I don't overdo it. So we're currently at a 6.6, so it ain't gonna take a whole lot. Normally my water is about 7.8. I'm surprised that it's that low. Then maybe there was a little bit of residual low pH water in here when I cleaned it out today. All right, here's my sulfuric acid. This stuff is, like I said, from the auto parts store for filling batteries, and it's the weaker percentage sulfuric acid, like 30 to 37%, somewhere in there, I forget. And the stuff I have out in my greenhouse is like 93% strength, so it's like 3 times stronger. And I'm not even going to get into the titration curve. That kind of changes everything using a different strength of sulfuric acid. But anyway, for in here, the 30% stuff or whatever this is from the auto parts store is way more forgiving, but I'm still going to be careful. I'm going to put in, let's just start with like 3 tablespoons of sulfuric acid. We're going to stir this in and let's see if it affected the pH at all. It's probably not enough, but like I said, I got to be careful not to overdo it. I know there's little stirring pumps I could have down here to mix all this stuff up way better, but I've never messed with it. This always works fine for me. All right, it's coming down a little bit. It's close. We're at 6.3. Let's add 2 more tablespoons. You'd think I'd have all this dialed in by now after 25 years of doing this. If I knew exactly how many gallons was in here, I would know exactly how many ounces of this to put in, which is how I do it in my greenhouse. I put exactly a certain amount in, the same every time. I don't have to check it like this. But doing it this way, you gotta be very careful, because everything kind of changes each time. The amount of water that's in here and all that, amount of fertilizer. The fertilizer can even affect the pH sometimes. All right, let's stir this in and see what we got. Hey, I see a 5.9 on there. Perfect. Now that I'm getting it all stirred in, it bumped up to a 5.996. Here, I'll show you real quick here. .02, so we're getting close. All right, I'm gonna turn the camera off and get this pH right where I need it. Get the water warmed up down there in that yellow tub, and then I'll bring it back and show you how we fertilize these rock wool slabs with the seedlings. All right, I have my pH corrected water in the tub. I got it to about a 5.7. 5.5 to 6.2 is ideal. I just always shoot for about a 5.8, but we got a 5.7, and that's perfect. And the water is all nice and warmed up to 70 degrees, and the EC, or the fertilizer levels, are at a 2.1. I'm gonna grab my slab. This is a tray of grape tomatoes, and I'm just gonna set it right there on top of the water, and it is instantly wicked up into the rock wool, and it's nice and wet. Watered at the root level, and kept the actual grape tomatoes themselves dry, which is what we want. Then put it right back up here, and I'll repeat that process for all 12 trays, and then they will be good to go for probably, when they're small like this, they can almost go 4, 5, 6 days. Now when they get just a little bit taller, maybe another inch taller, and they start having the first true leaves opened up, I would probably water them like every other day or every 2 days, 2 to 3 days, just to make sure there's no salt buildup at the root level in these rock wool slabs. I want to give them a fresh dose of pH corrected water with the right amount of fertilizer every few days. And then once they're out in the greenhouses and they're a lot bigger, obviously they're going to get watered a lot more. When the sun's out, they could be being watered and fed every day or every other day. And then obviously when they're put into the Beto buckets, they're getting fed every half hour all day long because they're rapidly growing and setting fruit. But I'll be explaining this entire process along the way throughout the spring as these tomato plants grow and show you everything from start to finish. But today I just wanted to kind of show you how we water and feed them down here in our basement, and I'm really happy with the way they look for only being 1 week old. I always hate cleaning up this big mess in here. I kick myself every year for not doing it in the fall when I have some help around, but we're always so busy doing other jobs on the farm, you know, putting things away for winter, field work, pulling up plastic and drip tape. And you know, I'm always excited to do some traveling and get away from the farm and take a break. But here we are, January 21st, I think, and I'm less than a week away. 10 days off from bringing my plants out here. So top priority is getting this mess all cleaned up. And I can see this year, I have a lot of weeds growing against the baseboard back here. I've never had that issue before. I need to put another strip of ground cover right along the edge up against that baseboard, just staple it to the baseboard like I did over here on the other side. I'll show you here in a second. And that'll keep all those weeds from coming up, because all that foxtail went to seed and the seeds have fallen in the trays. So we gotta be very careful when we are seeding all of our crops this year that we clean out those pro trays before we fill them with dirt, or there's going to be foxtail growing up in them, and then the foxtails will compete with the plants as they're growing in here and then get transplanted out in the field. That's the last thing we want. So I should have never have let that mess grow up like that in the first place. Over here, look at that. That is terrible, you know, and thrips can overwinter in that stuff. That's probably why I have a thrip problem, because I let that get out of hand. But see how this ground cover is tucked underneath this sheet down here, and then I stapled it right to the baseboard, and it does a really good job of keeping all the weeds down. I'm not sure why they got out of control over here. Must have been a crack or a hole in it, but I ran that all the way along the baseboard. Still, it looks like I stopped right here. That's why the weeds are so bad, but we gotta get all those pulled. I am very happy that the sun is out today, because I don't have to turn the heater on and it's comfortable. I'm actually gonna take my coat off. It feels great out here. It is 60 degrees. It was in the teens last night with a fresh inch of snow on top of the plastic. But it has managed to warm up to 60 degrees in here, even though it's like 20 outside. It's amazing how warm it gets in here from the double layer poly system, just with a little bit of sunshine. And every day that sun is getting a little higher and higher in the sky, and the days get a little bit longer, and that means spring is on its way. I'm ready. All right, everything's cleaned out, and I'm just pulling back the racks now. Oh, I'm so glad that mess is cleaned up. All right, final rack. All right, I just got back from my brother Joel's with his 5 sheets of insulation board. And then I had a couple of my own. It's just 1 inch, which works fine. He just happened to have this on hand after a building project, and it works great to keep the cold air from coming up underneath the tomato plants on cold, dark, cloudy days, which we still get plenty of during January and February. Another thing that I do with some leftover flats that my Ella pots come in. This is what I plant my seedless watermelons in. They come with like little Jiffy pots in these 50 count pro trays, or whatever you want to call these. They're real rigid and stiff. I'm gonna set these down and line them up, and the flats of tomatoes I'm gonna grow on top of these. And the main reason I do this is because in a couple weeks, the roots will grow through the rock wool cubes and they'll start sprawling out underneath the flat onto this blue board, trying to get moisture and fertilizer, you know, that runs off through the rock wool cubes after watering. We want those roots to air prune and not spread all over the place underneath the flat. So if I prop them up on these, I can't remember if I do it this way or this way. I don't know if it really matters, but the roots will come out the bottom of the rock wool cubes and hit air instead of this, and it'll cause them to grow back up into the cube or stay in the cube and be air pruned and not spread out everywhere. So probably in the next video, next week sometime, I'm probably about 10 days off from bringing out our seedlings from my basement to transplant them into the 4-inch rock wool cubes. So I'll definitely be showing that in either the next video or the one after that. It's coming quickly, and warm sunny days like this gets me excited for spring and growing hydroponic tomatoes. I think this is where we're going to wrap this one up today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all again real soon down on the farm.